Okay, yeah. Southside, yeah. That's where I spend downtime, yeah. I mean, at night, the rap, I check the podcast for the smoke, yeah. I don't want to fight with
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Southside Rabbi. We are back again with more truth for your head top. And we are bringing faith to the city and culture to the conversation.
Wow. Thank you, Lord.
And that's what we're trying to do here today.
Yes.
And standing or sitting, I should say, it's like he's standing though, because the kind of stature of the man that I'm about to talk about is when you're sitting next to him, you feel like he's standing.
Wow.
Because of just his sheer ability and his acumen. I mean, if you look up the word acumen in the Webster's dictionary, you will see a picture of Kevin Elijah Smooth and Groove Burgess sitting right there. And so this man that I'm talking about, listen.
Wow.
When I heard that Ron DeSantis was thinking about canceling.
Your next president, by the way.
He very well may be the next president,
you know,
and the only person. Oh my gosh. Hold on, man. So listen, when I heard that Ron DeSantis was thinking about, or he was pushing back against the AP African American Studies courses that they were that they're running a pilot on here in the Florida schools, I was like, the only person that could be able to stop his pushback is KB, because this man took nothing but AP classes in high school, right?
He said, who can we get?
Graduated high school with a college degree. So listen, some of y'all barely graduated high school with a diploma. Some of us was just struggling along, and if you live in Florida, just trying to pass the old FCAT.
Yes.
And this man right here graduated with a high school diploma and a college degree at the same time. Around what, 17, 18 years old? How old were you when you graduated? 14. So what I'm saying.
And I didn't have to take the FCAT. By God's grace.
Exactly, because it's a testament to how brilliant he is.
No, it's not. But I will say this.
Well, I mean, if you're going to college and high school,
so
you should
like
not
the
have to take
SATs and the ACTs, right?
Yeah, you have a grade that's it was high enough that you didn't have to take the FCAT.
No. Oh, yeah. Well, it didn't apply to me because I wasn't in high school anymore, and because I was living in Florida and had no plans on going to school out of state.
Right.
But I had to take the ACT and the SAT. I just was forced to take it.
Right.
I literally walked in. Well, let me give a bit of context. If you graduate high school with a college degree, it's automatic acceptance into any school in Florida.
Right. That's what I heard.
Your grades don't matter.
It don't matter. Yeah, you're going anywhere you want.
Bro,
so you could have went to Florida State, UCF, FAMU, Bethune-Cookman. I don't think you want to go to Bethune-Cookman now.
I was heading to FAMU.
If you would have went to FAMU, you would have lost your Christianity as soon as your five toes stepped on that campus, bro. As soon as your five toes hit the concrete, that Christianity would have left you like a ghost in the wind.
Bro, you know what's crazy though?
What?
I knew that I did not have the strength
right,
as a new Christian to go to FAMU. I just knew it. But anyways, that was how do we get into this?
Because we were just talking about how intelligent and brilliant and adept and how full of acumen you are, how sagacious your mind is.
Wowzers. Okay,
and you're done. I mean, you just chilled all of us up. No, I was just joking.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that I am honored to be sitting here next to
this man just
Ameen the Dream.
I didn't even get to finish
Hudson,
mine. I'm just gonna let him
whose
run with the wind.
Reputation, character, and commitment precedes him everywhere he goes. Walking through Southside St. Pete with Ameen is like a caravan with the Pope at the center. As he walks around, as he cruises around, waving, giving people his godly, regal, presidential, cuffed wave and signs of blessings. Let me tell you something. The hair that protrudes from this man's head is honored to be there.
No.
The glasses that rest on his face are gifted, privileged, and honored.
Yeah.
to share space on this man's
Oh,
face. The
my
beard
gosh.
that wraps around the chin,
Wrapped around.
that utters the depths
The
of
imagery.
scripture.
The imagery.
I just want to say this last thing, and I'm done. And we're going to get into this episode. We
Okay.
can't do this all day, bro.
I know.
There's
I
stuff
know.
to talk about.
We have to talk about something.
Any man, any fool, and I don't even just say fool, just the world's brilliant minds.
Oh,
Any
my gosh.
brilliant mind in this world. Because it's a spectrum, brother.
Yeah.
Whether you are a fool or the brightest of the bright, you can be on the spectrum.
Right.
Ameen is off the spectrum, though.
Yeah.
He's in his own lane.
'Cause
But any fool or brilliant mind can take an apple, cut it open, and count how many seeds are in the apple. But only Ameen the Dream Meme Machine Hudson can take a seed and tell you how many apple trees will come from that seed.
Oh my gosh.
This is the level of depth that this man has into the unknown. And I am in awe as I sit here, being able to feebly say with my hat in hand that he is my friend.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise for Ameen the Dream.
Thank you.
All right, what are we talking about, baby? 'Cause
First of
I
all-
think the W went in my category today.
I think you are right.
We're losing sight of what this was for.
Right. One of the things that I have to mention is KB
Why?
is like, I always said if Bad Boys was a real life thing, KB would be Mike Lowry.
Mike Lowry.
It's
Bad
Will
Boys.
Smith.
Oh, okay. Got you.
And I'm short old Martin Lawrence. No, I'm just
Shut your
joking. I'm
mouth.
just joking.
But I
I'm
tell you
joking.
one thing I have learned
What's up?
from Will Smith
What?
is that in this life, bro, you pay your taxes, you love your wife, and you keep Jada Pinkett's name out your mouth. All right,
I'm trying to tell you, man. One thing I had, but no, Will Smith is still, despite what happened.
Sure.
I think that Will Smith is very apologetic. You know what I'm
Sure,
saying?
sure,
and
sure.
I think that he really feels bad for
Sure,
what he did.
Sure.
And I do think that what happened is it's unfortunate, but it's a stain on Will Smith's career that I think will always be there,
Sure.
especially like how it happened, when
Sure.
where it happened.
Yeah, who he did it to.
Yeah, and then who he did it to.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Brother, what are
But-
we here to talk about today?
We are here to talk
Unfortunately.
about, unfortunately,
Yeah.
there has been another death that has happened by the hands of police
Yes.
to a unarmed black man in the streets, and as we see now, this has gone pretty viral. And I'm talking about the death of Tyre Nichols.
Yeah.
He was a 29-year-old man. He died on January 10th, 2023.
Yeah.
And he died 3 days after being arrested and assaulted by 5 Memphis police officers.
Yep.
And if you haven't heard about what has happened, I would be surprised, because it's been all over the news, all over social media. And there's now body camera footage that has been released.
Yes. Did you watch the video?
I did.
Okay.
And
I couldn't bring myself to do it.
I think that I do not recommend anyone watch it if they can't. You know what I'm saying? I do think that there has just been too much videos, man, of us seeing people being essentially murdered by police officers.
Sure.
But in the case of Tyre Nichols, it was just really bad because they beat him to death. Literally. It was 5 police officers. They say that he was originally pulled over for reckless driving. And he got in a confrontation with the officers. I think that he ran from the officers.
Yeah.
The reports about like why he got pulled over and what happened is a little murky. It's very murky.
Okay.
But they're saying that it was for reckless driving. He ended up running from the officers, but then the officers actually came in contact with him again.
Okay.
And they got into a second confrontation with him. This is the same night.
Got you.
In this confrontation, is when the beating happened.
Gotcha.
Right. And if you watch the body camera footage, they're basically telling him to put his hands behind his back. And they're beating him really bad. One video that was the surveillance video, I think, of a business or something. I don't know if it was a business or a residence or something that was across the street. Had a much more clear picture of the beating that took place, and it was bad. I mean, to a point that the officers really stood him up and they held his hands behind his back and they just took turns punching him in the face.
Up and did that.
Yeah, he was standing up and his hands was behind his back.
I did read a report that in the midst of that, he too called out for his mother.
He did. He called out because his mother was his mother's house, I think they said, was about 100 yards or something away from where this was happening. So he was calling out for his mother.
Okay, got you.
They just beat him bad. And then after he got beat, of course, they sat him up against the police car. He was on the ground and they kind of, sat him up against the car. And he was he was beat so bad that he fell over. And they were trying to keep sitting him back up. But when the EMTs arrived, they did not render him any aid, man, for a very long time. The police were not concerned with giving him any aid. The EMTs were not concerned with giving him any aid. He ended up going to the hospital, fell into a coma, died 3 days later. And I think they said he died of, I think our producer even said kidney failure. And I saw that the medical examiner was saying, but it was all due to him being beat, of course. Wow. And so all 5 officers have been charged with 2 counts of official misconduct, 1 count of official oppression, 1 count of second-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping. And the reason they said that it was kidnapping is because the district attorney looks at kidnapping as holding any person against their will, which interferes with their liberty. Yeah. And they said that it's their contention that whatever the legality of the initial stop, there at a certain point, Tyre Nichols was unlawfully detained by the police officers. Wow. And it's aggravated kidnapping under the law because it resulted in bodily injury, and also because the persons involved in the forcible detention that was unlawful also possessed weapons at the time. Wow. So that's kind of how they look at it, like a kidnapping charge. All the police officers made bond on January 27th. And the funny part about it is one of the officers, Demetrius Haley, had already been accused for beating an inmate at a penal farm. That inmate claimed that Haley and another officer strip searched him and then beat him until he was unconscious. Oh my! That lawsuit got dropped later on, and so that's what's happening now. The another thing is that these officers were all a part of this unit that they called the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit.
Okay, that sounds very familiar. That sounds very similar to the L.A. County policing.
It might be because it was the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit, and they said that the unit was basically like a special unit that got put together to kind of crack down on a lot of violent crime that was happening in the Memphis area. Yeah. But a lot of folks, from what I understood, there's been a lot of controversy about the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit because a lot of folks feel like the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit conducted themselves as more like a wolf pack, like as a gang, more than as these police officers. Sure. And they were supposed to be on these so the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit, they don't really pull people over for traffic stops and stuff like that. So that's why they're wondering, why were they pulling Tyre Nichols over?
The S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit was a title given to these cops by the department, or how they referred to themselves?
Yeah, no, it was by the department.
Got you.
Right?
Okay, so that's different from...
Yeah, it wasn't their own kind of rogue unit. But the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit, it stood for Street Crimes Operations to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhood.
Got you.
That's what it stood for. They launched it in late 2021. It was a 50-person, 7-day-a-week team dedicated to fighting violent crime, with officers focusing on weapons, auto thefts, and gangs. Yeah. And putting they call them crime suppression officers, putting them in hot spot areas. So areas that are high on crime. Right. And said they did not really respond to dispatcher calls. They were more targeting certain areas that were flooded with crime, violent crime, and they were working on the unit was basically supposed to suppress the crime mainly by visibility, mainly by them just being visible.
Their presence.
Yeah, their presence and them being in the area. Now, that's why. So now, why the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit was involved in stopping Nichols is a mystery to a lot of people, because they were like, the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit doesn't really do that.
Sure.
And so they're still trying to figure that out. Now, there were some other Memphis residents that actually reported having run-ins with the unit, the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N Unit. And there was one black male who said that he was a subject of excessive force by the officers, and that was just days before the Nichols situation. The Memphis resident, his name was Cornell Walker, he told the Los Angeles Times that he was actually accosted at gunpoint by the S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N officers.
Wow.
Including one officer that was involved in Nichols' arrest during the time, right? And so the reasons that they have they've criticized the unit is because they said, man, they moved in unmarked cars, right? They blended into the neighborhood, so they didn't look like officers. They would be in these unmarked cars bumping loud rap music, you know what I'm saying, with hoodies on, you know, so they look like kind of like regular guys, like regular street dudes.
Right.
But they were these S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N officers. And it seems like they was moving like a gang. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And so now, since this has happened, the Memphis PD has disbanded that S.C.O.R.P.I.O.N unit. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
So one of the big controversies around this, though, is that all 5 officers that did this were also black.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so sadly, what I have been seeing from some of my white neighbors is they have been kind of using this as a gotcha to the whole black folks talking about police brutality against black folks by white officers or white supremacy permeating through, the kind of institution of policing in America. And I've just seen a lot of like, these officers were black. So this is never about race. This whole police brutality thing, it was never about race because these officers are black. So what do y'all got to say about that?
Sure.
I've seen a lot of those kind of arguments, and I kind of think it's a shame that folks are they saw that this man got killed by these officers and then thought that this was the time to use him as an apologetic against the idea that there's racism, institutional racism when it comes to policing black people. And so, but here we are, right?
Sure. Let's just zoom out for a second. Before we even get to the content of what's being said.
Right.
Meansy and I, we try to practice disciplines in our thinking, in our lives, in our households that stop us from going places that we feel drawn by merit of just being human.
Right.
For example, human beings like simple answers. I often find that if something wild is happening, if I can at least get a title, some kind of explanation, that I can put 2 and 2 together, that you can alleviate my cognitive dissonance. If you can get rid of that for me, I feel better about the situation. I feel like I have, here's the word, control.
Yeah.
Humans like feeling the myth of control.
Yeah.
We want to feel like we have a lid on things.
Right.
When you do not.
Right.
But one of the ways in which we feel like we have the lid on things is that we can give an explanation for it.
Exactly.
What we find in this world, though, is that the multi-layered, nuanced, ultra complex creative act that flows from the living God who set all this up is actually reflected in day-to-day life.
Right.
That things are not as simple as they seem. That there is, we see this all the time with studies, right? And if you can have somebody pull all this research and bring it to the table and then land on a set of assumptions.
Right.
To have all those assumptions toppled over just a few weeks later or a few years later because the tool used to gather the research was imploring a question that was hard to understand. So you were getting a certain answer because you were asking a confusing question.
Right.
We see that happen more times than we can mention. So we see that happening all the time.
Right.
So the idea that things are simple or that we've been given a set of explanations that have stood the test of time over, 60 years?
Mm-hmm.
Because this argument that Jason Whitlock is making is the same argument that was made in the late 60s and early 70s.
Right.
The idea that everything that is happening within these communities has nothing to do with our contribution. It has nothing to do with how the government might be involved in their lives unless they are helping them to get free stuff. But it has nothing to do with the structures that the government put in place. It has nothing to do with the opportunities that they might be afforded or the education system that they have access to. It has nothing to do with the complexities. That is way too complicated for us. What is simple and how we simply understand things is that if folks had better families, none of this would happen. That is that predilection inside of you that wants to boil things down to easy, digestible, simple aphorisms and comments.
Right.
That refuses to do the hard work, which I would argue is love, to actually understand what's going on, that we might apply a redemptive path forward.
Right.
Because that is work.
Right.
In some ways, it's lazy thinking.
Yeah.
It's lazy thinking.
Right.
When we can simply Band-Aid, spray on, rehashed, age-old adages that have been disproven.
Right.
And use them as a foundation by which you help people understand what is going on here.
Right.
The fact that someone can say that the issue of single motherhood, or we'll say the challenge of single motherhood, is directly connected to why Tyre Nichols is dead is asinine, bro.
Yeah, it's preposterous.
It's preposterous, and for those who lean conservative, it's also against your conservative philosophy of personal responsibility and personal agency.
Yeah.
That the whole idea is we are our own. We we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps.
Right.
Nobody has agency over us except us. We are hyper individuals.
Right.
Right. And that's not, this is not me on the outside speaking in.
Right.
I'm on the inside speaking up.
Right.
Because I understand what it is to think that way.
Yeah.
I would identify myself, if we're talking politically, as a Black conscious conservative.
Right.
I understand your rationale.
Right.
I also think it flies in the face of how folks from our camp think about how racism works in the world. Racism is individuals intentionally doing harm on the basis of race.
Right.
It's individual, it's personal, and it's always man to man. It's never system to people. It's person to person.
Right.
You basically just said that the system around the police department is oppressing Black people on the ground because the officers themselves are victims to the system that's been created by the single Black mother.
Right.
This has nothing to do with how you think about how racism works.
Right.
Or how family values work.
Right.
You see this is something that's actually systemic.
Right.
It's wrong, but it flies in the face of your very arguments.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, is that something that we can learn from the life of Jesus and how he reacts to the death of Lazarus in Luke 16.
Right.
Is that Jesus in full, bro, knows all the details of what's going on, how bad it is, what the outcome is going to be, which is a good one.
Right.
Right? He knows
Right.
that he's going to show up to Bethany and pull a dead man, who happens to be one of his good friends, out of the grave.
Yeah.
He knows. Yet when Jesus gets word of Lazarus' death, he cries. He weeps.
Yeah.
That the suffering of Mary and Martha, who watched their brother disintegrate into the grave, knowing that they are good friends, with the man who can bring death to life, to see to have in your mind, even for a moment, that if Jesus was here, none of this would have happened. It feels like, this is a bad example, but this is what comes to mind. It's like getting the winning lottery ticket in your hand to just on your way to cash it, lose it on the freeway.
Ooh, yeah.
Jesus, if you were this close,
Yeah. None of this would have happened.
none of this would have happened. Jesus interacting with the suffering of his friends
Yeah.
moves his heart, even though he knows that the answer is resurrection.
Right.
And resurrection is sure.
Right.
Shows us that what I learned from that, what I think can be applied to this situation, is that those of us who can't first feel the weight of the suffering here.
Right.
My man is still at the morgue. He's not even in the ground yet. But before one can really begin to parse how we ought to think through this, have you had a time to sit with the humanity of the situation?
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't wept, is your heart postured like weeping as you think about what is going on in this situation? I think that Jesus gives us a beautiful picture of one who is stepping into a situation where people are looking for answers,
Right.
and having answers that are actually accurate,
Right.
but still taking a moment to sit with the grief of the situation,
Yeah.
to connect with, to kiss the humanity, bro.
Right.
And one of the things before we begin to peel back this conversation is that it's important for us to not become so, I hate to say it this way, but suffering pornographied. Because this is what pornography does to people.
Yeah.
What it does is it makes you, it desensitizes you.
Yeah.
And it begins to,
It's what Matthew McCullough would say in the book. What Matthew McCullough would say in the book "Remember Death," the
Right.
pornification of death.
yes. Okay, so maybe that's where I got that idea from. It is the pornification of death.
Yeah.
Because you're watching it as a passive observer.
Yeah.
It is very sanitized on your phone, bro.
Right.
You're-
And now death has become more voyeuristic with the body
Exactly.
cams, with that.
Absolutely,
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah.
absolutely. That's doing things to you.
Right.
It is, man. I remember when the earthquake hit Haiti, John Piper tweeted in reaction to it. He says, "I'm sitting at my computer looking at pictures of the devastation in Haiti, crying my eyes out."
Yeah.
In the chain of events of understanding any sorrow needs to be the kissing of humanity. I'll say this too, my guy. And we got to be aware of how pornographied we are with suffering.
Right.
That we become it bounces off of
It does.
us.
Yep.
In fact, it feels like in my own life,
I know for
it
a fact.
often doesn't, I don't even wake up to it until I'm at the funeral.
Yep.
Then I'm like,
Yep.
oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Right.
This is for real, and my name is written all over this because this is going to happen to me.
It is coming. Yep.
That human, earthly experience
Yeah.
is necessary for any conversation around answers. Because without the light of our hearts connecting in empathy, compassion, and sorrow and lament, without that being the guide, I'm not talking about, because I know what folks will say. So you want us to be emotional.
No. Yeah.
Brother, there is a big difference from, so if you are a overly emotional person
Yeah.
in that, and typically what people mean by that is someone that's controlled by their emotions.
Yeah. You don't have any control over
That is a character deficiency.
Right.
If you are emotive though,
Right.
if you feel,
Yeah.
that is a godly character attribute.
Orthopathos.
Yes.
Yeah.
We serve a God who feels.
Right. Right.
Think of the logic of Jesus in Luke 16. You know that this isn't What are you crying about?
Yeah.
I feel that with my own child, bro. Like I feel that with one of my babies. Like, even if I know that daddy can solve the issue, the fact that you're hurting bothers me. And what I'm saying that at a base level, are you moved by people's hurt? Dear Christian, dear brother, dear sister, if your heart is calcified, where you don't feel anymore,
Right.
unless it's close to home.
Right.
I have heard people, I'm not going to say his name. I'm trying to say people's names less.
Yeah.
I heard one popular thinker who is beloved by a lot of Christians say that he doesn't care about anybody else except his wife and his children. He said, I don't care what happens to you.
Oh, wow.
We think that
That's not godly.
this gentleman, though, makes great arguments for things that we care about. But we think that we are safe to blow past the demonic arguments
Yeah.
of godless self-service.
Right.
We think we're good to ignore the arguments that those people make because they give us good arguments about
Other stuff.
other stuff.
Right.
About gender issues.
Right.
Or abortion.
Right.
Or marriage or whatever it may be.
Right.
But you have to know that the danger that you, brothers and sisters, there is a danger to the heart that is lost feeling.
Yeah.
It is dangerous. And what I'm saying is, oftentimes when I hear people engage these conversations, they start from non-feeling.
Right.
And then they basically think of this as a series of thoughts and arguments. It just feels
Yeah. It feels
disconnected, highbrowed,
like,
and carnal, bro.
Yeah. It feels like we're reducing one's life and tragic death down to syllogisms and, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
like arguments to make a point about either a cultural point or a political point.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like it could feel that way, that
Yeah.
that is the first knee-jerk reaction.
Yes.
That's why I started off by saying some people's first knee-jerk reaction is, see, the officers were black.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
That's what you look at this and you get? Oh, well, I mean, yeah, of course it was tragic, but,
Yeah.
oh, so the political point that you're trying to make is more important than the fact that this young man
Yeah.
lost his life for no reason.
Yeah.
In a very brutal way.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you don't see if you don't. I'm not, and this isn't a racial thing. This is a this part is
this is
a human thing.
right?
If you don't see your son, your brother, your father, your uncle, the dude that discipled you, if
your friends,
cannot see a reflection of your image in that person, there is no hope you'll ever see God's image in that person. It is what it is, bro. What are we talking about?
Say that.
You see them as this otherized entity that you can use for your arguments.
Right.
And it shows what you love is you love your arguments. You don't love people. You love your points.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And what I'm saying is, oftentimes what you'll hear from communities that we hail from is people who are on a spectrum of feeling. And that feeling can go into burning stuff down. That feeling can go into practical solutions in reform. But the conversation's a lot different, though. When you're factoring in your very life into the face of that unarmed dead person on the ground. My wife is factoring in me. She sees my face. She sees KBJ, Keanu. You don't need to be black to do that. You just need to be serious about the image of God and loving people.
True.
That's it.
True.
And I just want, as we move deeper, as we push deeper into this conversation, I want our people to know, our tribe. If you follow Southside Rabbi, God forbid, and I'm sorry, it's kind of a superstitious phrase to say, but I'll say it like this. we pray that God will put a stop to this kind of thing now.
Right.
Not we know it's going to be in the kingdom. None of this will happen, but we want to see heaven come down now in our police in the policing practices, how we treat people, all that jazz. But bro, show up to the conversation with your compassion in hand, or don't show up at all.
Right.
Don't show up at all.
Right.
You're just doing damage.
Yeah.
This is argument tennis. Anyways,
Argument tennis.
with that being said, I think we flavor the conversation with a heart for righteousness when it's being led by empathy.
Right.
The conversation is happening though, I mean.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, I saw that on Twitter too. I
Yeah.
saw that the biggest concern for a lot of folks
was the race of the officers.
the race of the officers.
Yeah.
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 And I think that is a shame.
It is a shame.
When the race of the officers is the
folly and a
biggest
shame.
concern.
Yes.
When, over the person who has died, I think that it's a shame. But it does speak so much to where our culture is.
Sure.
It speaks to the fact that we are in such a culture war over racial issues that when stuff like this happens, the first thing is to think about, how can I either prove my racial point or disprove someone else's, racial point.
Right.
But as you said, the conversation is happening.
Yes,
right?
yeah, for sure.
And I think that
what is the folly
yeah.
and shame?
Uh-huh.
Let's paint the picture
Yeah.
of the fighters.
Right. Yeah.
Black people
Mm-hmm.
have been talking about racism in the police department for a long time.
I mean, since the inception
At the inception.
of the police department.
Yeah, they've been like,
Since they were
guys.
slave catchers, and then when it
Yes.
moved into them getting squad car, going on horses,
Sure.
then moved to buggies,
Yes.
then moved to squad cars,
Yes. There's been a lot of conversation. about
huffies,
that. Yes.
mongooses. Probably moving to electric scooters soon.
Soon. Yes.
Segways.
Segways.
Yeah, so I said huffies.
So black people keep talking about this.
Yeah.
And Dr. John Perkins,
Uh,
he wrote this book about reconciliation, and his earliest memory of hating white people, hating police officers,
right.
was overseeing his unarmed brother get shot dead in the South, outside of a convenience store. I believe that's how the story goes.
Yeah.
The Lord actually used that hatred in his heart as basically the springboard to biblical reconciliation, peace, love, forgiveness, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a witness for a lot of folks too. They
Right.
have, I think I've said on this show before, in all my interactions with police, personally,
Mm-hmm.
I would say about 70% of them have been negative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where y'all percentage is, but that's basically where mine has been.
Yeah.
And I've been too grateful when they've been positive.
Yeah.
I
Right.
leave feeling as though I
Was a normal
found
citizen.
that I was like Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, and I
you
pulled the
that
golden ticket out.
your back pocket.
You know what I'm saying?
Got it.
Yes.
Yes.
People keep complaining about this,
Mhm.
right? Darren Wilson, Derek Chauvin.
Yeah.
It seems to fit the narrative
Right.
that there is a race issue in police, in modern day policing, that there is a bias there that exacts itself on minority citizens.
Right.
When the officer is not white,
Mhm.
It feels like the narrative isn't as neat. How do you respond to that, I mean? So I understand. In my mind, I'm thinking, I'm struggling to make the connection of why the fact that the officers were black matters at all.
Yeah, I think.
But
yeah.
does it matter when the officer is white? Because
Right.
that's the argument. The argument that they're making is it matters a lot when the officer is white. Does it also matter when the officer is not white?
I think it does.
Okay.
And I think that they would say, well, this is an argument that can't be defeated because you're saying if a black officer punishes a black person, it's white supremacy. If a white officer punishes a black person, it's white supremacy. What do we, I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that it's because folks misunderstand what is being said
Sure.
is that
The framework is jacked up.
The framework is jacked up. I think that if you continue to see racism as just interpersonal individual actions, then this makes no sense.
Right.
But if you see racism not as just interpersonal interactions, but the interpersonal interactions that do happen in racism comes from a broader system of racism, then it makes sense.
Right.
And so I think that what folks are saying is that the policing institution, the institution of policing, is inherently an institution that has always, from its inception, been filled with a preference for seeing white folks as less violent and less criminal than it sees black folks. And I think that that's true. That's what I personally believe. Even when you think about the inception of the police force, and all of the eras that policing has gone through, black folks have always been seen as more brutal, criminal, violent, and a threat, more dangerous, right? That does not mean that white folks don't get some of that treatment as well, because it is a system full of broken people, But I think that
you're gonna see more of that exactly.
More of that, yeah. I think that you're gonna have people that would say, well, the statistics show that white people get more police brutality than black people. And I would say, well, I mean, white people they're a much larger percentage of the community than black folks. But I think that if we looked at it as this percentage piece
in proportion
to the percentage, we get it more. In fact, what you see is that white people do have kind of like, the numbers and the data for police brutality of white folks is only a bit higher than it is for black folks. That's with white people being 64 to 65% of the population, and us being 13% of the population. It should be way higher. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that when you look at that, you're like, okay, we're really getting the most of it, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Folks would say, well, the reason that is that black people only make up 13% of the population, but are on paper responsible for
more of the crime,
more crime.
Right. Yeah.
Is because black people commit more crimes.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I usually, when somebody says that to me, I say, touche, why do they commit more crimes?
Okay.
And I feel like that always kind of reveals what they actually believe about black people.
Sure.
Because I would say, okay, touche, you're right. Why? Why do you believe they commit more crimes? Oh,
well, because they're living in
because they're motherless. They're fatherless.
Their father's gone. Why is their father gone?
Yeah, why, you know what I'm saying? Or I talk about that. Or, and what I always say is, it does not surprise me, because if you look at data anywhere, the most crime in almost every state you can look at in America and in every country, crime is always highest where there's the most concentrated poverty. And in America, the most concentrated poverty is in black neighborhoods. And now you have to ask yourself, why is that the case?
Yeah, for sure.
In almost every state in the nation, all of the poorer neighborhoods are predominantly black. And that's where you see the crime. There's always going to be larger crime in neighborhoods that are under-resourced. Because there's people there that are trying to survive. And usually when you are living at the bottom of the barrel, it could turn you into, you can start doing things that are illegal in order to get money. Right? And there's usually, when you're in neighborhoods that are poor and under-resourced, there's 80 bad decisions to 2 great ones. Not a lot of opportunity there, not a lot of economy there, not you know what I mean? And so, barring some circumstances that, can help you get out of that, there's not really a lot of opportunity for you to do something with yourself that would make you as successful as one may be in neighborhoods that are not under-resourced, that have much more opportunity.
Better education. Better food.
Right, yeah. Better food, better education. I mean,
folks don't even think about what it means to live in a food desert.
You're not, even if you literally, there's so many things that you can take, but even if you just study the educational piece, you will see that it's not even close to folks in these poor, under-resourced areas getting the kind of opportunity that people in other well-resourced areas have when it comes to education. And we all know education is a big part of, who you become. Is a big part of your success.
It's
a predictor and an indicator. And so I think we have that. And then of course you get the fatherless argument, which a lot of the times, again, there's data that shows that black fathers are actually just as involved or more involved as white fathers are.
Yeah.
A lot of that fatherless argument comes from like a father not being married to the mother at the time of the birth.
Yeah.
And they kind of take that data from these birth certificates to say that these black babies are fatherless.
Right.
That's not necessarily true.
Sure.
They may not be married, but it doesn't mean that their father is not involved in their life. That's
Sure.
number one.
Yeah.
But number two, I think that there are some benefits of having the father in the home. The data clearly shows
Yes,
that.
a lot.
There's a lot of benefits, but to dwindle down black communities being full of violence simply because fathers are not there
Sure.
is to be very reductionistic
Sure.
and make and to oversimplify the actual problem.
Right.
It is not just due to fatherlessness.
Sure.
But when I think about this particular situation with brother Tyre Nichols, I don't think that what matters is the race of the officer more than the race of the actual person.
Okay.
And what I would say is because policing, I believe, it has a systemic and institutional problem when it comes to the way that black people are policed and are seen.
Yeah.
I believe that it does not matter that you are black and you are a police officer. You can still be subjected to the same kind of ideas, ideologies, and systemic norms of the system that you are part of.
Yeah.
So for instance, I'll say this. I met a brother probably about 10 plus years ago at my church who was a black police officer in Southside St. Pete, where me and you grew up.
Yes.
I never forget this brother came up to me after service and he said to me, I cannot believe that you and KB are from South St. Pete. I think that is so awesome. And I was like, oh yeah, praise God, man. We love where we're from. You know what I'm saying? And we were talking about that. He said, I'm a police officer in South St. Pete. And I was like, oh snap, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, I'm a police officer in Pinellas County and my beat is the south side of St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
And he said, God convicted me when I found out that y'all were both from Southside St. Pete. And I was like, how? And he said, because, like in the scriptures, what folks were saying about where Jesus was from, how could anything good come from Nazareth? He said, I used to ride around patrolling South St. Pete and I would literally say the same thing. How could anything good come from this place?
Wow.
Until he said, and the fact that I found out that you and KB are from South St. Pete, it gives me hope that God is actually doing something there, and that there is good that could come from there. Let me ask you a question, y'all who are hearing this.
Yeah.
What do you think that this black police officer riding around South St. Pete telling himself what good can come from this place, how do you think that affects the way that he polices the community?
Yeah, how we interact. Yeah.
How do you think that affects the way that he polices the community? How do you think that affects the way that who he decides to stop?
Yes.
How he decides to treat the person that he stops?
Come on.
How he decides to handle the calls that he's going on for domestic violence, or maybe some teenagers that may be loitering, or somebody that's smoking weed? How do you think that kind of mindset towards the community that he is policing affects the way that he polices that community?
Sure.
And he's black.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So what I'm telling you is that the idea about a community of people, predominantly black, being a community in which nothing good can come from here. All of these people are just criminals.
Yeah.
And there's no hope here. And they don't care about themselves or their families. They're not pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps.
It's like a massive zoo that we are
zookeepers. All we are zookeepers. We're not here to rehabilitate, and we're just here to make sure that the lion doesn't bite the spectators. That's it.
Yeah.
We're just here to keep animals in line.
Wow.
How do you think that a black officer had that kind of mindset about this black neighborhood that he was policing?
Yeah.
Him being black did not change that.
Because it's bigger than that.
Because it is bigger than that. The mindset in the kind of ideological norm of how that neighborhood of people is seen is something that is actually permeating in the institution of the actual police force.
Sure.
It is bigger than his skin color.
Yeah.
It goes higher than him.
Yes.
And it gives him that same kind of mindset
Right.
towards the people that actually look like him. Right? And so if you're asking yourself, how could someone that is black have the same kind of mindset that you all would say that these white officers or white supremacy is producing, that is how. Your skin color does not inoculate you from a kind of
Racial
white
superiority.
supremacy, racial superiority mindset.
Yeah.
It doesn't. In fact, you could actually try to come under the wing of that racial superiority if I play the game the way they play it, I can actually take advantage of some of the benefits that I may get regardless of the color of my skin if I just take on the same cultural stereotypes and prejudices that the institution that I'm working for has about these people that I'm policing.
Yeah.
And so that's how it could happen.
Anthony Johnson, the black Angolan man in the 17th century in Virginia, who got his freedom.
Yeah.
And he bought slaves. And they said that this man was the most ruthless slave masters that the slave masters of the day would go to him like, hey,
yeah,
you're taking a little too far, bro. You might want to chill out with
the
that.
white slave masters going to this black
like, yo,
slave master like, hey, you're going a little bit too hard.
Because I think so. But here's the challenge for me though.
Because you got to think about it real quick.
Go ahead.
Do you honestly think that these same 5 black police officers would have beat this man to death if he was a suburban white man at the same age?
No, probably not.
I don't think that they would have.
Yeah.
I think that they would have said, this is white man, we can't.
Yeah, and part of that is because they would
and they wouldn't even think that they need to
resource.
Yeah.
They would see themselves as more susceptible to consequence.
Right.
If they were to act like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which says something about how you believe consequences would be handed down to you if you're beating a white man versus if you're beating a black man.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, again,
and not to say that white men don't get beat.
They do. We think about Daniel Shaver that got killed.
Sure.
The one individual that we were just talking about that got shot by the SWAT team as soon as he opened the door, a white man. Not saying it doesn't happen.
Sure. What I saw on Twitter was an argument over, is this white supremacy? Is this white supremacy?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think that's the question, but
yeah, for sure. And what to me feels like a more helpful, more accessible way for us to think about this, because in this situation, it does open up the conversation that the conversation is typically about trying to get white people to act better or believe what black people are saying.
Right.
But I think when we start talking about colorism, bro, and the ways in which racial superiority is incarnate in our community, which is what colorism is an outworking of that.
It is, yes.
But it's also,
and when you say incarnate in our community, you mean the black community.
I'm talking about the black community.
Right.
I'm talking about the ways, and I let me be careful here, because it feels like, I'm thinking about my man Emmanuel Acho.
Yes.
And
what happened to him?
What happened to him on that? And which was a injustice in my opinion.
I believe so.
Unnecessary and unfair. But I think that sometimes people who are connected to the more radical traditions of the fight for civil rights, or I guess that wouldn't be right. We'll say more radical traditions of black progress.
Right.
That they can scoff at individuals who are heard by the majority. That the fact that you can sit down, like a king, for example.
Yeah.
The king was called Martin Luther King from, which is an evil phrase, from his detractors.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of black folks within the civil, I don't know if they would call themselves a part of the civil rights movement, but I guess by proxy they are.
Right.
But who would challenge him and say, you're going too far. You're not going far enough.
Yes.
You're not talking spicy enough.
Yes.
This non-violent stuff is going to get you and everybody else killed.
Yeah, I mean we clearly see that was the case with him and Malcolm X.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was to say that by making progress in the conversation, you are actually betraying your people.
Right.
Which is and
you're not going hard enough against white people.
Which is
you're actually also in some way trying to work with them, and you can never work with these white devils. That's kind of like But that's kind of how it was. Like
Right.
you're trying to hold hands with them, and they're just gonna do nothing but stab you in the back.
That's right.
And so you
which
should
is
be
a-
just trying to build with your own people, and that is it, and kind of stay in these ethnic or racial enclaves.
Or when you do show up to the conversation,
right,
don't give them anything that might be reasonable. Bankrupt them.
absolutely, yeah,
And there is arguments to be made for, especially when we think about, there was the documentary that Ameen showed to me about this injustice in Clearwater, St. Pete, and Tampa around developers building structures, offices, homes, communities over black graves.
black graveyards.
Yes.
Yep. Happening in our city in droves.
To reverse that is somebody's going broke. Somebody's
Yeah.
generational wealth has to go. And there are good arguments to be made for that.
Right.
But if someone wants to come in and say, well, what if we parse this out? What if there was what if there was a compromise?
Right.
That for some people, for some folks who, again, are more closely aligned with radical tradition,
Right.
that would say any kind of compromise is evil.
Yeah.
Let us stay where we are before we find a way to work together.
Right.
What I'm saying is, is that to me, when I say that there is, in my estimation, a conversation to be had that isn't simply about trying to argue white supremacy. We're simply trying to debate if we can get you all, the other side, white folks, to agree that all of this is about white supremacy.
Right.
Because in my estimation, black police officers being more racist than white police officers is not a foreign thought.
Oh,
within black communities.
that is not a foreign thought. I think that you would be hard pressed to find anybody in the black community that would say that could be the case. That could not be the case.
Right.
It is absolutely, which is like what I'm thinking. Like what I think that for, like, in my opinion of the conversation, I'm just trying to frame it. I'm just trying to frame how it is possible that this still could have been a racial issue for the black police officers.
Yes, because racism is incarnate in our communities,
Yes.
bro. And this is what I'm saying, bro. I set all that up because I know that I'm gonna get. I know that I'm going to sound too agreeable.
Yeah.
Because this is Jason Whitlock goes on Fox News and begins just disparaging black folks.
Oh man,
it's like the answer to celebrity voices that make the general population feel uncomfortable is to bash black people. That is a page right out the playbook of Sister Owens.
Right.
It's like,
true, very true.
I can't even hear you over the hatred. Now, I do think that my understanding that racial supremacy is a real issue,
Right.
I know it very well because in my own family, there is a thought that nothing good comes from Southside St. Petersburg, or that we can't achieve,
Right.
or that we will never, or that we won't make it out.
Yeah.
Or if you want, I had somebody tell me, someone who I really, really respect. I dropped this song, and we sampled this person. It's an African American person, and I won't give any more details because you'll figure out who it is. I talked to them on the phone about our marketing plan, about how we wanted to push it, to the masses. And this person said to me, "I love this. I love the song. I think it's a hit. But if you really want to be successful, you need to make sure you get a white man behind it. Get you a white man. Don't have one of us leading point on this. You need to have.
You need to get a white team.
That's right.
White marketing. Yeah.
And in similar fashion, I had a conversation in Central America. I was talking with a friend of mine from a Central American country.
Yeah.
I won't give any more detail than that.
Yeah.
And this person we were debating. There's a phrase in Latin culture called "improve the race." Mejorar la Raza.
Which translates to
improve the race.
Yeah.
And what is meant by that is, this is the white man's world. If you want to improve this country,
Yeah.
if you want to see your native people, come out of their
Their
destitution.
savageness. Their savageness. We have to breed it out.
You need to marry
Yep.
white.
Mm-hmm.
That, for my friend in Central America, which he defended, by the end of the conversation, he repented of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning, he saw it as the air he was breathing because that's how the world works, KB.
Yeah.
Do you want us to stay down here? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is practical. It is a practical thing to think that proximity to those who have the power
Yeah.
is good for me. Why would you look down on me for thinking that? And as I have these experiences within my community, I don't need to go to anybody. I can look within our community to think, to be able to discern,
Mm-hmm.
especially with issues of colorism.
Oh, absolutely.
As a darker brother, I mean, I'm a darker brother. I dealt with that my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Where do these ideas come from?
Right.
It cannot be that there isn't something out there called racial or white supremacy. That cannot be the
Or a
answer.
construct of whiteness. It can't be that it doesn't exist.
It can't be, because how did it get to how did
Right.
it get here?
Right.
Why are we looking at each other?
And saying that there's something better about the color of your skin, the lighter you are within
Yes.
the Black community. It happens in
But-
Latino communities too.
But here's where I think the conversation needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
If you
my
can.
little meager opinion. The divisions that exist between societies are ubiquitous,
Mm-hmm.
my guy. You can go to South Africa and see the coloreds and the blacks,
Yep.
who are both black.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
And you can see that the proximity to the minority white folks that are in South America and South Africa
Is what is seen as
is better than being connected with these Negroes. You take Mahatma Gandhi, man.
Oh my
man
gosh.
went down to South Africa and said, hey, I'm standing for my people, but don't get it twisted. We are not like those folks down there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see it on racial terms, but you also see it in societies like Uganda,
Yeah.
or where everybody's black.
Right. Right.
Yet you see that there's this divide between those who have and those who do not have. Those who have proximity of power to power, that power begins to corrupt the way they see their fellow
Yeah.
human being.
Absolutely.
They then begin to create systems, structures to keep their power. They begin to erect norms.
Right.
Hegemon. They create norms.
Hegemony.
They do. This is what it is to be normal. Normal life, normal presentation, normal language looks like those that look like us,
Right.
which you can see it cut on racial lines, because here is where we're going, and y'all can say whatever you want about me.
Mm-hmm.
50 years from now, this nation will be almost unrecognizable to the 1700s, bro. Or
Oh.
the 1800s.
Oh, absolutely.
It's unrecognizable now.
Right.
But it's going to, the world that my children are stepping into,
Uh-huh.
the conversations around who holds the power
Right.
are not simply going to be racial, they're not going to simply be melanin.
Right.
The conversations that my children are going to be having aren't going to be simply cut on racial lines.
Yeah.
It's going to be cut on other things, because sin is going to be there.
Right.
Sin is always going to take advantage of something that seems like it's the advantage to have.
Right.
Whether that's money, power, the dominant skin tone,
Yep.
structures
Yeah.
or biases that seem to give you passes.
Right.
It's always going to use those things to abuse others.
Right.
It's going to continue until Jesus comes back, or the kingdom somehow throws up a W so big. I don't know where you are eschatologically, but I think for some folks,
Yeah.
they think that we're going to be riding
Oh,
around
my
in
gosh.
Jesus chariots
Yeah,
of
I mean,
fire,
we gonna have
and everybody going to be worshiping on every
Yeah,
corner.
and we gonna have
Maybe
theologians
that'll
as
happen.
presidents.
Maybe that'll happen. Maybe this will be a Christian
Right,
world.
right.
And Jesus gonna
And
walk
then
on
Jesus
the
is
scene
go ahead
saying,
and walk
"Thank you."
on back and say,
And we gonna hand them the keys.
Right, exactly. We got it
Here
ready
you go,
for you.
Lord.
We
We
got
set
it
the
ready for
table.
you, Lord. That's all we was. He was like, thank you. That's what I was waiting on. I was waiting for y'all to get this thing together.
So I think that it's not less than racial.
Right.
But I do think it's more than racial. And don't hear me here saying that it's a sin issue, not a skin issue.
No.
No, sin makes it a skin issue.
Yeah.
But don't lose the scope of what sin does.
Yeah.
And at the same time, make sure that we apply, I would say, the most salient, effective balm or redemptive application to the scope, which is that at the end of the day, I think as Ameen, he detailed it so beautifully for us in that story. At the end of the day, what you see when you look at an image bearer, bro, means everything to how you carry yourself. Because I will say this. There are two police officers in my mind right now. One I know personally, one I just follow. Three police officers. So the detective in Evansville, Indiana, who I had lunch with or breakfast with. He took me to the airport from a show. I had breakfast with him, and he asked me before I left to pray for him because he reads what the scripture teaches about our approach to enemies, our approach to the broken, our approach to dysfunction, and he can't reconcile it with what he sees. Why? This particular detective worked in children's sexual abuse. He saw the worst of humanity regularly. He got the phone calls to go and detain or rescue or whatever it may be. And he says, through what I have seen, I can't see these people as anything other than animals. And I'm afraid of how it permeates how I see everyone, because don't get it twisted. Hate is very hard to keep contained. You can't put a lid on it.
Oh yeah, it spreads.
It spreads, bro. It's fungus. It's fungus. It floats through the air, starts getting on everything. You end up having to burn the whole couch, bro.
Yeah.
Burn the house. And what that means for us is that at the core of policing in America is this issue that is supported by the systems that train these police officers, which we saw detailed very, 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 we saw a great example of how the system can codify a bias, right? I'll say something about that in a second. But what we realized, though, is that if you were walking around seeing the worst of humanity, you begin to think humanity is the worst. I would also add to your argument earlier about black folks committing half of the being so overrepresented in crimes that are committed. You know, there's been other studies, particularly with drugs, on how much drug usage different races are consuming. And what they found was that there was no difference in the amount of consumption. In fact, they found that white folks were consuming drugs more, not just by merit of being more of them,
bigger number, yeah,
but by usage. Selling it at equal rates as well, and using it at equal rates, and in some cases more. Yet, there was only one group of people being mass arrested for it, though.
Right.
And that was black
people,
folks.
yeah.
So that the policing, that if you're searching for people committing crimes. You can Google this right now. At almost all times, every American is committing a felony. At almost all times.
It's like I remember Mark Lamont Hill said, if I'm a police officer and I go downtown and I follow a car around downtown for 2 hours, I'm going to be able to find something to pull them over for.
Somebody's going to break a law.
Yeah, I mean,
and because there are so many laws on the book that books that aren't even that are antiquated and not actually being applied.
Yeah.
We
you
are
can
all
still
felons.
get it on the technicality.
The technicality
if you wanted
is
to.
there, boy.
Right.
You can dig deep. And what I'm saying is, there's also a thought of, because what we saw in the crack epidemic was that the more money that they spent on policing these neighborhoods, the worse the drug problem became.
Yeah.
The more that we see this happening with Dirte in the Philippines.
Yeah.
He has these death squads where they're murdering
people that are using drugs.
Murdering. He said that. The president of the Philippines, not anymore, but he said that if you are using drugs, we will kill you.
That's
and
exactly
what
what
they
he said.
found is that it did not stop drug use.
Right.
Shame and guilt
can't
is
shame.
not enough
Yeah.
to change. You cannot
You can't shame
people.
someone out of addiction, man.
You cannot shame people into transformation.
Yeah,
You
right.
can't do it.
Right.
You cannot guilt them into transformation.
Right.
You also can't police them into transformation.
Right.
This is not to say that police are useless.
Yeah.
I am emphatically not with abolishing the police.
Yes,
but
likewise.
I am emphatically with reforming police departments. These other two police officers that I mentioned, brother. I'm gonna talk about them in tandem because the time is long. We've been talking for a long time. Both of these police officers, before they think about how they, execute the law in communities, they are deeply committed to keeping their hearts filled with compassion towards the people they're policing. Mm-hmm. One is a good friend of mine. He's here locally. He was on the NYPD for a long time.
Yep.
And the other officer, like I said, I follow him online. You see them giving the community that they police a place in their hearts. Mm-hmm. I'm not just showing up to work. I'm an agent of organization and grace and compassion and defense. Mm-hmm. I see that this commitment, how could you say that nothing good comes from Southside St. Petersburg when the statistics, if you just looked at the studies, most people in Southside the vast majority of the people living in that community are like Ameen and I.
Yeah, and the data shows that the vast majority of people in hoods all across America are actually not committing crimes.
Yes.
It's a very small number of people in those neighborhoods committing crimes. The vast majority of people in these under-resourced, underdeveloped, or poor neighborhoods are actually living as regular, upstanding members of society, trying to make it.
That's right. Wanting those people that you are mapping onto the whole community, they want them gone like you do.
Exactly. They're the ones calling the police on them.
Yes.
It's not white folks coming from the suburbs saying,
boys,
"Hey, Ronnie is over here smoking crack on the corner. Could you get him?"
Yes.
It's the upstanding members of the actual neighborhood that are actually calling the police for help.
My auntie, I was at Thanksgiving not too long ago, Thanksgiving at the family's house in Southside St. Petersburg. A cousin of mine showed up with a warrant for his arrest.
Mm-hmm. I can already imagine how your family's going to respond because I know them.
They said, "Here's your plate of food," and the police are on their way. This is not. We are not because we don't want to go to jail.
We do not harbor criminals here because we are not going to jail. Your uncle just got a good city job. And he is not. We are not losing.
Let me tell you what we not going.
Well, I'll tell you one thing we're not going to do. We're not going to harbor criminals in this house. There's a lot of things that we do here, but harboring criminals is not one of them. So, hey.
Yes. Yeah, I think that it's just important to realize, to see that I am here, an agent, not just of the state, but of the kingdom. Mm-hmm. This is where Romans 13 begins to come into play.
Absolutely.
I am here to protect the innocent.
Right.
And to stop the wrongdoers.
Yes.
I'm not to be an agent of chaos.
Right.
But an agent of order, protection, and justice. These two police officers that I'm thinking about take that serious. I also think about the interviews that they did with the Daytona Police Department.
Yes.
Here in Florida. They
gave a shining example of what real community policing looks like.
Yes, community policing.
Yeah.
Where they recognize there are things that are in me as, do you believe, especially if you're a Christian.
Yeah.
You think that somehow that Adam's fall stops just shy of the police academy?
Let me tell you something, KB. Adam's fall touches every single blade of grass on this earth, but where it stops is 807 49th Street South, where you pull right up to that St. Petersburg Police Department building. That mug has it there. You shall not pass. That's what happens at that mug. We are safe.
We're safe here
from the fall and
That's
from
right.
depravity.
That's right.
In this building.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're right. It's asinine to think that. First of all, we look at sin.
Yeah.
And we look at.
Let me just say real quick. The Daytona Police Department. I'll just finish this thought now. Hold your thought. They recognized that Adam was coursing through their veins. They didn't use that language, but they realized.
Yeah.
Because they were looking at the results.
Right.
Any datatician can sit down and say, hey, it seems as though you're over-policing this place, but you don't even go over here.
Yeah.
Man, I don't never see the police where I live now. I see the police all the time when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I hardly, man, and people are breaking the law. Let me tell you. They are running through these halls in these high schools. Up here, they're selling Oxycontin and Percocets and Mollies. Unfettered.
Oh man, I have friends that worked as counselors in these high schools in these well-off areas, and the amount of times they have busted these students for hardcore drugs and freaking sexual assault, recording stuff that they're doing to other students on the phone and texting it to all of the student body. All of that stuff happening there, all of the drugs they're recovering there. I'm like, this is crazy. It's just as bad as when I was at freaking
because there's sinners over there. There's sinners with resources, but there's still sinners. And what I'm saying, King, is that what we saw happen once they recognized that there was a problem and reform might be good, not just for the reputation of our precinct, but for the community, for the people. And they begin to talk, man, when they begin to exercise training to deal with these biases, they saw a community that began to trust them and felt protected by them, and their arrest. The arrest changed. Crime was stamped out. You can look up the Boston 10-Point Coalition, where the community was working with the police department to put a plan in place for us to be able to do the thing we all want, which is to live quiet lives, work with our hands, and take care of our families. And it was successful for a period of time. And what I'm saying is, there's got to be some hard work done that then jumps into because it affects the way you see the communities that you're policing. I think that is true, because as you say, Adam's sin, which has become ours, has affected everyone. And if we believe that one of the sins that we see in Scripture is partiality, which we can also say is a kind of bias. Why in the world would we think that police are exempt from that sin of bias? If we have seen that sin can be institutionalized, I would find it hard-pressed for us to say that lust and sexual immorality is not institutionalized. Surely it's
in our world. Surely it is. Surely that's why we have a multi-billion-dollar pornography industry. Surely that's why we have an underground sexual trafficking industry. Surely that's why, prostitution is out here. Strip clubs exist. All escorts exist, Surely sexual sin has been institutionalized and systematized. What makes us think that other sins, like a host of different biases towards someone's
which is
race,
partiality, and God hates it.
Which is partiality, and God hates it.
Partiality.
Which is partiality towards someone's race or ethnicity or sex, their gender, or their class, how much money they make. How can we not think that that is not institutionalized? Do we not see what James is saying to Christians in James chapter 2 when he says, hey, y'all seem to be trying to put together a system in the church in which y'all are making it totally okay and normal to give rich people seats here and to push the poor Christians away. And then James goes into the reason for why this doesn't work. I mean, why this is ungodly and sinful. It's not a true representation of what pure religion looks like. And then James has to remind them.
Come on, Ameen.
Because that's what happens when you start getting close to power.
Yeah.
Is that you start kind of forgetting. I feel like power is a bit like a charming, manipulative psychopath.
Wow.
Is that what power does is it brutalizes you.
Yeah.
And then when you get around power again and it offers itself to you, you start forgetting all of the brutalization that the power did to you before.
Yes.
So it's like that one person that you know this person is liar, cheater, thief, or he's harmed you so many times. But when you get around this person, they're so charming and they're so fun to be around that you start thinking about, well, maybe this person is actually not as bad as I
love this guy
thought they were. Or like a woman in an abusive relationship that says, you know, I know he beats me, but then he does these crazy acts of love and they romance. I got home and there was
my job.
Yeah, there was 60 flowers at the job and rose petals and bubble baths. You know what I'm saying? And that's because he has to cover up his psychopathic side where he's blacking your eye every 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, you're right.
And so I feel like when you're getting close to power, that power actually starts to make you say, maybe it's not, the brutalization is actually not as bad as I think, or maybe it doesn't exist at all. And this is why James is talking to them. And then James is saying, let me just read what James says.
Go ahead.
Love
Let's
to
let
do
James
that.
speak for himself.
My brothers, James says, James chapter 2, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. So James is starting out by saying we are not supposed to be partial people.
Yes.
Which is what our sinful nature
in
would
light
have
of
us do.
Jesus.
Right, in light of Christ.
Yeah.
For if a man is wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears fine clothing and say, you sit here in a good place, while you say to the poor man, you stand over there, or sit at my feet, have you not then made distinctions amongst yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? So James is saying, bro, if y'all cannot make this church, y'all cannot start institutionalizing a norm in which y'all are seeing rich people come in here. And it's funny that James says, when the rich man comes in there, you pay attention to the one with the gold ring.
Yes.
Right? And wears the fine clothing.
Yes.
But then you say to the poor man, sit here in a good place, or stand over there. I mean, you say to the poor man, stand over there, sit at my feet. So obviously you're not paying this guy any attention. All of my attention goes to the rich man, the powerful.
Yes.
Right? Then he says, now you're making distinctions among yourself. Here's the classism between rich and poor.
Yes.
And then you're starting to judge you're starting to judge people by those distinctions. That's what he says, judges with evil thoughts. Your bias is evil, right? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen the one?
Come on, sir.
Choosing those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom.
Yes.
I love how James does this. This poor man is actually rich.
That's right.
In a way in which you're not recognizing, because you're recognizing riches by carnality.
That's right. Woo.
You're recognizing the riches by what a man wears and what a man has on, how much money he has in the banking account, but you're not recognizing that this is truly the rich person and you're despising him.
Yeah, brother.
Right? Is what James says, right? And so, has
Ameen.
not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. And then James has to say this, because this is what power does to us.
Come on, sir.
He says, are not the rich the ones who oppress you and the ones who drag you into court?
Wow. Have you forgotten?
Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called?
Yeah.
One of the things you have to ask yourself is, why would James put that there?
That is wild.
Out of nowhere, it seems
That
like
is wild.
James is saying, did y'all not forget that these people that you're showing all these partiality to are the ones who are oppressing you? Uh-oh, bad word. Oppressing you?
Yeah.
And then dragging you to court? And then blaspheming God's name. So your bias is causing you to totally forget all the brutal things that the rich has done to you.
Yeah.
And it's causing you to forget not only how they are oppressing you, which it's crazy that James will say that, because that sounds like it's a bigger, he's talking about the rich in general oppressing, which means it's a system.
And blaspheming
it's an
Jesus.
institution, right?
Yeah.
And then he talks about how they're blaspheming God, your God, right? Blaspheming blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called. So not only is your bias causing you to forget have some kind of sociological amnesia about the brutalization that these folks are doing to you, but it's also causing you to totally not see, or at least justify and tuck away, their lives being ungodly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then you have to ask yourself, why are these ungodly blasphemers in the church in the first place?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And so power.
In position.
Power and position.
Yeah.
And power will make you forget these things.
Yes.
And I think that this is what happens, is that in our sinful nature, we can be partial in many different ways.
Yes.
Again, we are not just talking about race, but class, gender, all kinds of ways that we can be partial.
Right.
And for us to think that this cannot also make its way into a policing institution, in which some of that partiality could be based upon where a person lives and also or their skin color.
Right.
For us to think that that is somehow irrational,
right,
would be for us to actually take what Scripture tells us about our own selves, and to throw it in the trash.
Yeah, the police are no better than you.
The police are
us.
The police are not a religious institution. As much as folks may treat them that way, they're not a religious institution.
Yeah.
And even if they were, religious institutions don't mean that the Spirit of God is there at all.
Sure.
So they are not exempt, just like I am not exempt, just like you are not exempt from having biases that could be racial, or it could be based upon gender or class, or it could be based upon just outward appearance. You can see a man walking down the street. You can be a white man seeing another man walk down the street with a bald head and tattoos and some Doc Martens on, and think this brother looks like he might be a skinhead, and this man could be a pastor at a church down the street. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's all kind of biases that we may have. There's all kind of ways in which our biases rear its head in partiality. And all I'm saying is that
that's great, Meansy.
It's all good. And all I'm saying is that we have to come to the understanding that that those kind of biases and that kind of partiality is a reality in our nation.
It is. And I think that's why it's important for us to reject anybody that wants to make this less than race.
Right.
But also demand that we make it
more
than
race. We have to make it more.
Particularly,
and I think that is, and I would just say this real quick. I think that is where the conversation fails on the pro white supremacy. Like this is not pro white supremacy.
Those who want
to see that this is nothing but white supremacy.
Like a white supremacy scoreboard.
Right.
And we are just trying to find as many. There's a white supremacy scoreboard. Let me say it. There's a white supremacy scoreboard, and folks are trying to fight hard to make sure that they can put points on that board, either for the presence of white supremacy, or for the non-existence of white supremacy.
Exactly.
And that is what it sounds like this whole conversation turned into.
That is what it's turned into.
Where it's who's going to get a point? The deniers or the ones that see it everywhere?
That is actually true.
Which to me feels
we are missing it.
Like a missed. It feels like the emphasis you're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable, bro. Because this is a matter of understanding. Number one, systems are reflections of people's hearts.
Right.
Because your heart is systemic.
Yes.
The heart of man, your individual heart, has a systemic kind of reality to it.
Right.
We can almost see this on the brain under a microscope.
Right.
That there are literally neural pathways that run certain ways when certain things happen.
Yep.
There are certain reactions that your body has when you're in certain situations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about trauma responses.
Right.
Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah.
That's not you individually deciding to be traumatized by what's in front of you or having a trauma reaction. There is a system in your heart that responds to the world. We can't help but put systems together because we are systems in ourselves.
Right.
You are a mind, body, and a soul that exists as a depends if you are a dichotomist or a trichotomist. I'm a dichotomist. But you exist as a dichotomy, mind, body, body, spirit, soul.
Right.
That works in tandem with the ways in which you are disciple towards Jesus or away from him.
Yeah.
All of that has a systemic element to it. That's a part of why disciplines are so important.
Yeah.
Because you're putting in policies, bro,
Right.
that you are practicing that create a reaction out of you that you hope becomes second nature.
Yes.
You hope that you would be so given to the principles, policies, disciplines of godliness and righteousness that when situations happen,
That it changes the system.
Exactly. Or I was going to say it like this, that when you are you would hope that those things would be so in place that when a on-the-spot situation happens, somebody curses you out, there's a loss of a family member, something wild out of nowhere happens to you, that the things that have been systematized in you will just flow out. It'll just work in tandem with the situation. That is Christoformity.
Yes.
When I
spiritual
have
formation.
been so formed that when things happen, I'm cut off and trafficked. I'm offended. One cheek. I'm being
slapped
insulted. With a slap to the cheek.
Right.
That there is a systemic reaction. And when I say that, I mean that in terms of how systems just run without anybody trying to make them run.
Right.
That it just flows out of you.
Exactly.
And what I'm saying is, since our hearts are like that, we are ontologically that way. Of course, we're going to go out and create systems that do the same thing.
Right.
Things that run as a reflection of who we are.
Right.
And what we're saying is, it is good to think deeply about how community policing, this is what I'm arguing, needs to include an intentional focus on the attitude, heart, and intention that the police officer has towards the people they're policing. Let me just say this, bro.
Yeah, amen.
I like to think I run a good company in terms of the culture.
Yeah.
People generally like working here, and by God's grace, they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
That happens in good companies. McKinsey, which by far be it from me, I compare McKinsey and Company to HGA Productions. But oftentimes, even if the work is hard, if you have leadership, HR, supervisors, managers, team leads that delight in the people they are leading. Warren Buffett said that the key to any successful business is delighting in the customer. He said that if I can boil down all success into a single practice, a single discipline, it is delighting in the people. When I think about the Christian plumber or the Christian janitor, I write about this in my book. When I talk about the difference between folks that they did a study on these janitors. One group of janitors went to this hospital and saw themselves as just cleaning toilets and getting a paycheck. The other group of janitors saw themselves as advocates for the patients in the hospital.
Wow.
Advocates for the sanitation that keeps the patient safe. That keep the doctors safe. That keep the nurses safe.
Yeah.
Is there any conversation in our hiring of our officers around how they might be inspired by if you're chasing bad guys, I get it. No one is telling you that the litmus test for community policing is being in love with the crack dealer.
Right.
Well, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm simply saying, is your dealing with those in that community being led by your love for those who are being terrorized by the evil? Because that's Romans 13. Romans 13.
It's true.
Is that the sword is in hand.
Right.
Is the gun in the holster.
Yeah.
To protect the innocents.
Right.
And be an advocate for justice. I understand that this is very complicated. The laws are such that what it would mean to bring total reform to policing in America would be, we have a long road ahead.
Right.
But what I have seen on the ground in my own life and the police officers I have a relationship with, that the most salient, not most salient, but what is a very practical, in the moment way in which we can bring effect to the people that they are, policing. Is doing deep work in their hearts towards that community wholesale, bro.
Yeah.
Because if you do not, it doesn't matter what race you are, you will take on a burden of superiority. You will take on a burden of you will take on a burden. You will be corrupted by the power. In that moment, bro, when you have absolute power to take me to prison, to interrupt my day,
Right.
not take me to prison, but take me to jail, to interrupt my day. Do we take that serious, that the power in which is being wielded needs to be intentionally managed?
Right.
I can't help but use Christian phrase, terminology, discipled.
Right.
That's what the folks in Daytona, that's what the police officers in the police chief in Daytona Beach saw. That we will get what we hope we're trying to achieve. We exist here to push back on evil,
Right,
and protect the innocent.
Yeah.
That's what we all want. That's what everyone wants.
Yep.
We'll be better at that if we start looking inward.
Yeah.
You feel me? On how we might align what our reactions are by at least being aware of them and then doing things to stop them from, sort of expressing themselves in policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're saying is good, KB.
Yeah.
And I think it's making clear that we have to think more deeply about how our institutions are reflecting our love for the people in which we should be serving.
Yes, bro. That's a good question. Do you love these people?
Yeah. That's a great question to ask officers.
Do you love the community that you're policing?
I'm not talking about tolerating them.
Yes.
Do you love them?
You love them.
Do you want their good? Are you for their flourishing?
And
are you giving them the benefit of the doubt?
And I'm afraid, brother, that there are too many people in the world that don't think that's even an important question to ask.
I agree. Because they're not asking it. If that was the case, we would already be asking it.
Yeah, bro.
And I think in a job like policing, where you are dealing with the worst of the worst.
The worst of humanity, bro.
Putting
your life on the line, too.
Putting your life on the line.
Yep.
Every day, mind you.
Yep.
There are police officers that die all the time. I do not at all seek to downplay how difficult a police officer's job is, how difficult it is for them to have to make split-second decisions when something happens that can either cost them their life or someone else their life. I don't. It is a hard job.
Yes.
Probably one of the hardest, because police officers not only get called when they need to actually put down a ravenous murderer, but they also get called when a couple is having an argument. They have to be like counselors. They have to be like, you know what I mean? They have to be, there's so many different hats that a police officer has to wear. But because the job does deal with the lives of people, and people who are a lot of the times in sensitive situations, the disposition that I believe that you should have as a police officer, it has to be one that is highly full of love and compassion and desire to see the community in which you are policing flourishing. Because if you just see this mug as a job, then I think that you become a danger to the people that you are serving.
Yeah, bro.
Because this is not the kind of job in which you can just simply see this as a paycheck, because there's too much life and sensitive subjects and circumstances and situations with these lives that you are dealing with to see this as just a paycheck. It's something that I believe that you have to be passionate about, and you have to be passionate about the flourishing of people and the goodness of the community in which you serve, not passionate about your own power.
Yes.
You can't come into this mug because you're passionate about being respected.
Yeah, for sure.
And the police academy is a way to get it. You can't come into this mug because you're passionate about, because you're insecure and you believe walking around with a gun and a badge is a way for you to get some kind of security and respect.
Yeah.
You can't come into this mug because you think that it would just be cool to chase bad guys all day because you have a caricature of what policing looks like.
Sure.
You can't do it for that reason. You
Yes.
have to do it because you want to love and serve these people.
Yes, brother.
We all know the difference between a teacher who loves kids and a teacher that is just doing a teaching job because they're getting paid.
Absolutely.
We all see we've all had teachers that have tolerated us.
Yes.
And we all had teachers that have said, I'm going to pour my life and pour my time and my energy and my resources into these students. We see the difference.
Right.
When it comes to policing,
Right.
and you're walking around with a gun
Yes.
and authority to use it,
Yes.
and a plethora of laws and technicalities in which you can use and to justify your usage of it.
Yes.
You can't be a person that is doing this simply for the money or simply for the respect or simply because you think it's cool to
Yep.
put on a uniform.
Yeah, bro.
You have to be doing this because you love the community in which you are policing and you feel called
Yeah.
to bring order and justice and love and flourishing to a neighborhood.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like I'm not calling a police officer a pastor by any means, but I'm saying when you think about the stakes of what it means to be a pastor,
Yes.
that you're watching over people's souls,
Yes.
that you're shepherding people's souls, and that you are going to be held to and that the Bible makes it very clear that you are going to be held to a higher standard because you are responsible for teaching folks. So why the Bible says, hey, not all of us should be teachers.
Yeah.
When you think about the severity of that, you start thinking and saying, this is not just something that I could do because I want to do it.
Right.
I got because of all the responsibility that comes with being a pastor, I need to make sure that I'm called by God to do this.
Sure.
And I feel like there are some jobs that are like that, bro.
Some jobs like that.
And I feel like policing is one of those
Yeah.
jobs. It's not a job that
Chris Rock said-
Oh, yeah, exactly.
We can't have a few bad apples.
We can't.
Like some jobs, everybody got to be in.
That is so
like
true.
doctors are like that. You know, at TGH,
Chris Rock said
most
that.
of our doctors are good, but some of our doctors like to slice right down the backbone when they're trying to look at whether or not your eye has a problem.
Exactly. And I think that Chris Rock made a great point in that.
Everybody gotta be good,
Right.
yeah.
Policing is a job where everybody needs to be good. You can't say, man, you know, the majority of the cops are good. We got a few bad apples. A few bad apples causes people their lives, bro.
See, but I think that is one of the ways when we talk about police reform, I want to hear Christians talk about it too. Because
Yeah.
I think that we bring this burden, bro. We bring this burden to the conversation. That we also we can have the racial talk. We can have the racial conversation.
We have to, yep.
And I want to downplay that. But my guy, the case of Tyre Nichols was a failure of love. They were not loving that man that night, bro. They were not. And don't try to stretch don't look at that and say, oh, so if I shoot, how can I love a dude that's shooting me? So the police officer not allowed to shoot the person that is pulling a weapon out on him? Brother, we are not talking about that.
That's not what we're talking about.
Can we at least say that whatever love is, and love has the space to act towards somebody in certain circumstances where you harm them. If love includes that, because there's an argument to be made for that.
I absolutely.
Can we at least say that with Tyre Nichols, love was not present?
Oh yeah, love didn't look
There
like
was
standing
nothing
him
in that.
up.
There was no way they could have done that and it be love.
No.
And what I'm saying is, King, I'm just struck right now as I'm thinking about the conversations that we have had with police officers in our community. And how in those conversations, both of the officers that we've brought up on this show, they gave us a cry for help, bro.
Yeah.
A cry for help.
Yeah.
The cry for help, King, was there is stuff going on in my heart
Yeah.
because of what I am seeing.
Yeah. That I don't want to leak into the way
It's
that I
a
treat the people.
spiritual, mental, physical trauma
Yeah.
that is permeating my view of humanity.
Right.
Pray for me. And I think by God's grace, in these cases, I'm particularly thinking about two officers that I mentioned. I mentioned three, but I'm thinking about two of them. Jesus is a fence for them,
Yeah.
right? The God, in a lot of ways, is what stands in between. Because the other thing too that no one talks about in these conversations either, when you go to worship the police officers, and when you go to worship the police and shut down any conversation about reform, I hope you know that a part of the disservice that you're doing, and probably some of the worst of it, is to the actual police. Have you read the studies on drug addiction, alcoholism? One of my good friends just lost her husband, who was a police officer,
Wow.
to alcohol addiction, bro.
Right.
It is
Which it runs rampant in police
It's
departments.
rampant in
and
police
divorces
departments.
and
Divorce,
suicides.
yes, suicide.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the rates of suicides among officers? Something is wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
And you having arguments with people on Twitter about Black Lives Matter is not helping.
Yeah.
Or Black Lives Matter, I'm sorry, having a bunch of arguments trying to convince people that you just scored another point against them in the white supremacy scoreboard.
Right. Yeah.
You're missing. There is, admittedly, it's no begrudge. I'm not saying this begrudgingly. Admittedly, the conversations are important.
Right.
But there's other, I say it like that, aspects to this conversation that stir the heart, that stir the mind, I think, for the people of God.
Right.
To show up with solutions that we know would be transformative.
Yeah.
And I think a part of that is asking the question around vocation, calling,
Right.
and love for the people you are policing. Bro.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a book called Every Moment Holy, filled with prayers for life in detailed ways. This book has, in a lot of ways, been like my concealed carry. You know what I'm saying? Like, I keep it on me at all times. Even I use it. This thing has just been it's turning into something that I want to keep on me at all times. Say it like that. Here is prayer, a liturgy for employed people. Here's the prayer. O Christ, who supplies my every need, I praise you for all provisions and for the means by which they are provided. For my current employment in this season of life, I give you thanks. By it may I meet my own needs and contribute to the needs of others. Let me work and serve in this position with mindfulness, creativity, and kindness, loving you well by loving all whom I encounter here. Say that one more time. With mindfulness, creativity, and kindness, loving you well by loving all whom I encounter here. Jesus, be ever present as mediator between me and my employer. And in this situation, that's us. We're talking about public servants. And I pray to God, if you are a public servant listening to this podcast right now, this is for you. It's for all of us. But take this with you. We pray, Jesus, be ever present as mediator between me and my employer, between me and my supervisors and coworkers, and in all my dealings with others in this work, reminding me that my treatment of them is the strongest evidence of my affection for you. Grant me, therefore, the patience to listen to others, the humility to learn from them, the compassion to consider their needs as my own. Woo! I'm praying, not preaching. And the grace to wear well in this place the name of my Lord, remembering that I arrive here each day as an emissary of your kingdom. Let me be an asset to my employer and superiors, working for their flourishing without resentment. Let me be a support to my peers, contributing to their advancement without jealousy. Let me be an encouragement to any I train or lead, affirming and equipping them without disdain. May the days of my employment, or may the days of my policing here be meaningful. Use this chapter in my life to accomplish your ends, whatever they might be. Father God, we also add to this prayer the family, oh God, of Tyre Nichols in this great injustice that is plaguing the family and the community. Would you, by your grace, your peace, and your mercy, swoop in, oh God, and consume that situation
Yes,
for your glory and their good. We also pray, Lord, for the Memphis Police Department, oh Lord. Father, would you use even the darkness of this massive failure of justice, would you use it, oh Lord, to bring about reform, about accountability, bring about peace, that the servants of the public might be agents of that peace, and no more, Father God, contributors to chaos. Be near, O great giver of life, O great comforter, O great fighter of justice. Father, you said your throne is built on justice.
Yes, Lord.
And that you hate partiality. Lord, bring your character, your way, and your presence to bear on that situation. And may your gospel take root as a result. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.